Tom Wright. Tom, great to speak to you again.
Brett, it's always a pleasure. I hope everything's going well for you today.
Well, it is a great day. It's a history-making day for the UFC and MMA fans with Labor winning the Victorian State election yesterday. You must be very happy with the outcome.
Well, you know what? I'm happy for our athletes, and I'm happy for our sports, and I'm happy for our fans. And I've already had an opportunity to send a congratulatory note to Daniel Anders and to John Eren, who's a sport minister, major events minister, as you know, and to the entire Labour Party. They've worked very hard and they've been very consistent, and it looks like it's paid off. And you know, it's an important and exciting opportunity for our sport to have a chance to really demonstrate, you know, why the octagon is the safest place for them to demonstrate their skill. And we're looking forward to seeing those changes.
Exactly. And for the listeners, Labor had promised that if they won the Victorian election, they would overturn the cage ban that's been in Victoria since 2008. But Tom, this was an election that UFC fans around the world, not just Australia, but around the world, were keeping an eye on. That's right, isn't it?
There's no question. You know, because I think, as you well know, Brett, there's only two jurisdictions, you know, in the entire world. And indeed, there's only two states that actually allow professional mixed martial arts in a boxing ring, but won't allow it in a fenced enclosure like the octagon. And so you know, people have been watching this for quite some time. You know, our position has been very consistent and very strong, in as much as, you know, we believe the health and safety of the fighters and the athletes and the officials is first and foremost the number one priority, and also providing a level playing field for the competitions to be held, and that just isn't the case in a boxing ring, which is why we would never bring a live event to either WA or to Victoria until the octagon ban was overturned, and so it looks like the first step in that direction has already happened for Victoria, and that's going to leave you know, WA as the you know, the only jurisdiction, not only in Australia but around the world, that still allows professional mixed martial arts, but only in a boxing ring. So I guess we'll have to start working on that as well.
Exactly. We'll speak about that shortly. But what we are all waiting to hear at the moment with this fantastic news, what are the UFC plans for Victoria in 2015?
Well, you know what? First and foremost, Brett, the work that needs to be done from a regulatory requirement to have the ban lifted has to be completed. And as you probably know, it requires a letter to be written to the Combat Sports Commission in Victoria. And you know, until such a time as that occurs, you know, we won't be announcing any of our plans. But you know, we have every expectation that will happen in time, and we have already started the planning process. And I'm actually heading to Las Vegas next week for our business plans for 2015, and I'll have a chance to sit down and speak with our owners and with Dana White and talk about what the opportunities are for 2015 in Victoria.
Tom, the last time we spoke, you mentioned that WA lost out in the tens of millions of dollars by not being able to have the UFC Fight Night at Perth Arena. Instead, that event went to Brisbane last December. So how much money will Victoria make by holding a UFC with, say, 50,000 people at Etihad Stadium?
Well, you know, certainly more than 10 or 20 million, that's for sure. The benchmark that we had, Brett, in 2011, we held our first stadium event in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada, and that event generated between $40 and $50 million to the local direct impact to the local economy. And we feel the numbers will be in that same scenario, that same vicinity, for our first ever event in Melbourne. And we're looking forward to you know, to working towards that.
And the good thing about it is that Australia put on such magnificent fights and events in so far Sydney and Brisbane. So we've got a pretty good track record of putting on good UFC events.
There's no question, and as you probably know, you know, Melbourne positions itself as the ultimate sports city, And I think, as we chatted before, Brett, you've got one chance to make that first impression, and so we want to make sure it's a meaningful one.
Fantastic. Tom, leading into this Victorian election, there was representatives of the Liberal government, and namely the Victorian State Police Chief Commissioner Ken Lay, Sports Minister Damien Drum, the Police Minister Kim Wells, among others. They've made some disparaging and what I believe is uneducated comments regarding MMA, or as they described it, cage fighting. This time, people just seem to be not buying into it this time. Do you believe that people are just more educated about the UFC and MMA than they were so in 2008, for example, when the ban was originally brought in?
There's no question, Brett, that individuals are more educated and better informed. I think they're more practical and realistic. Because when you actually have the argument and discuss the two positions openly, that the incumbent government felt that they really didn't have any basis in fact or any really objective rationale for the position they took, because it was as we've chatted. I mean, they actually allowed a sport to be conducted in an unsafe and an unfair environment when there was a safer and a more fair environment available. And so when you place those arguments, you place those facts in front of educated people, I think in time people come to the conclusion and say, well, you know what? There isn't a really strong reason that it's only emotional. It's only there's subjectivity, and so I don't buy the argument, and I think that's part of what's happened here. And I mean, I give the Labour government full credit, because when you step back from it, it was the Labour government in 2008 that actually put the ban in place. But having an opportunity to look at the facts, understand the arguments, see the benefits from a health and safety point of view, what did the Labour government do? They decided to change their position, and I think that's progressive, informed, government at work. Not every position should be entrenched for life, and because circumstances change, and they saw the circumstance changed, and they changed their position, and I think that's a worthy note.
I think the most embarrassing setback for the Liberal Party with their campaign came just a couple of days before this election. It was a social media campaign. Tom, did you see the video and also read what was posted on social media by the Liberal Party Victoria?
Yes, I did.
Yes. Just to remind the listeners, this is a quote from that social media campaign. If elected, Labor will legalise cage fighting in Victoria, endorsing extreme violence. Only the Nath Pine Liberals will protect Victorians from all forms of violence. We will keep the ban on cage fighting. Now, as a fight fan, I found that quite offensive, and also the picture they used with that campaign was a picture of Joe Stevenson. I think it was from UFC 80 with blood all over his face. I found it quite revolting as well.
Well, you know what? It's interesting because I saw it, and listen, I've been I've watched political campaigns in Australia, in the United States, in Canada, in New Zealand. I've watched them from around the world, and when that kind of initiative comes out in the final hours of a campaign by the party that issues it, it typically is one of desperation, and it's people are allowed. I mean, there's this thing we have in the world called free speech. But just as there's free speech, there's a free opportunity for people to make their own informed choices, and the majority of people, obviously, saw through those kinds of negative advertising, and in the end, for a host of reasons, part of which is what we're talking about now, but other reasons, of course, the government is going to change, and so I think that. Sometimes, those kinds of initiatives don't prove to be successful.
Exactly. I just found it amazing. I thought it was the most ludicrous political message I've ever seen, because mainly about the statement about Labor endorsing extreme violence, but also protecting against all forms of violence. But it was like they didn't know that the sport was actually legal in Victoria, but only the fence enclosure, i.e. the cage, that was only banned.
Well, if you actually listen to some of the interviews that not only sport ministers but premiers have spoken about, the ban, and you understand that they really haven't understood the issue and haven't really been providing a fair and objective perspective on things.
I'm speaking with Tom Wright, the UFC Director of Operations for Canada, Australia and New Zealand. Tom, with this landmark change in Victoria about to happen, will it put more pressure on the WA government now to follow suit?
Well, you know what? It may or may not. I mean, I think that once the ban is overturned in Victoria, as you know, Brett, there will be only one jurisdiction where the sport will be allowed in a boxing ring and not in an octagon. That's going to be WA. So I think that in that light, I think there's an opportunity to restart the conversation. There's obviously going to be an opportunity when Terry Waldron's successor is appointed and when that individual is selected. And I don't know when Premier Barnett plans to make that announcement, but I certainly would look forward to setting up a time to meet with him or with her to present on a factual and objective basis our arguments for having WA lift the ban just the way we hope will happen in Victoria.
Well, I see you've been informed because obviously the WA Sports Minister, the current Sports Minister, Terry Waldron, who, reminding listeners, is known by UFC fans for his suggestions on how to make the sport of MMA safer, i.e. his comments, put mats around the ring. Great suggestion. He's announced his resignation, so you see this as an opportunity, Tom, for you to speak to the person as soon as that person takes over.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've reached out in the past to Minister Waldron, and his position was rather firm, and again, I believe completely misinformed, but at least it was firm. And so I think that when a new individual is appointed, I would hope that he or she would have as much of an open mind to at least entertain a conversation with the individuals who are responsible for the sport, and that includes athletes, it includes local business people, and hopefully it includes myself as a representative of the largest professional mixed martial organization in the world, and I welcome to have those conversations. I've said this before, Brett, many times. I'm completely fine if you don't happen to be a fan of our sport and you don't like to watch it, but judge it on its merits and judge it objectively and factually. And if you're going to provide opportunities for the sport to be conducted, then make sure that they're safe for the athletes. That's all you want to make sure you do. And I think that's incumbent on any government, and I think it's incumbent on any sport minister that oversees the regulatory requirements for a sport like ours to be as informed and before he or she makes those decisions. And I would hope that I would have the opportunity to be part of that process. Well,
Tom, I said today it gives us, with the Victorian election result, gives us hope in WA that we can actually get the sport of or the UFC event at Perth Arena in the not too near future. So we're hoping to get you back to Perth again soon to revisit this issue as soon as Terry Waldron's successor takes over. Tom, again, it was a great day for the UFC in Australia, and it gives us hope. We'd like to thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to catching up with you and speaking with you again soon.
Thanks very much, Brett, and I appreciate the support that all of our fans in WA have done for the UFC. And as I said many times, we believe it's a matter of when, not if, and I look forward to when happens.
That was Tom Wright, the UFC Director of Operations for Canada, Australia and New Zealand.